Why is Magneto absolutely one of the strongest members of the X-Men? He only raised his right hand, and the massive door opened by itself. His mission was to retrieve his special helmet, a device that could amplify his mutant abilities thousands of times. He had already prepared everything for what was coming. Meanwhile, Professor X and his team arrived at the Sentinel exhibition. The venue was packed with people. As the president announced the start of the ceremony, the first generation of Sentinel robots was officially revealed. Hidden among the crowd, Mystique had already targeted Boulevard Trask, but just as she was about to make her move, Professor X used his psychic powers and froze her in place. At the same time, Magneto appeared inside a football stadium. He spread his arms and unleashed his magnetic power. The entire ground cracked and collapsed instantly. Then, something unbelievable happened. The entire stadium, weighing thousands of tons, was ripped out of the ground and slowly lifted into the sky, moving straight toward the exhibition. Moments later, Magneto took control of every Sentinel robot at the event. Trask had no idea the Sentinels were already under Magneto's control. He was still blaming Colonel Stryker for failing to handle the situation. One by one, the Sentinels flew into the air. The crowd thought it was just part of the show and started cheering, but they had no idea the real nightmare had already begun. The Sentinels turned their weapons toward the civilians and, under Magneto's command, launched a massive attack. The entire exhibition instantly fell into chaos. Professor X lost control of Mystique, who escaped with the president into an underground bunker. Above the city, Magneto gathered the Sentinels in the sky. Before the police could even arrive, the falling football stadium blocked their path. The White House was completely surrounded. Magneto landed on the ground and positioned 4 Sentinels around him as guards. Then he reached out his hand, sensing the location of the underground bunker. Wolverine and Beast tried to attack him from behind, but a Sentinel detected them. The Sentinel attacked Wolverine immediately. Wolverine tried to fight back, but his attacks could not even damage its armor. Instead, he was kicked away. Beast jumped onto the Sentinel's back and told Wolverine to stop Magneto. Wolverine thought that without his metal claws, Magneto could no longer hurt him, but he underestimated him. With just a slight movement of his head, Magneto controlled nearby rocks and injured Wolverine. Then he ripped metal beams from the ground and forced them straight through Wolverine's body. In seconds, Wolverine became trapped like a human pincushion. Magneto showed no mercy. With a wave of his hand, he threw Wolverine hundreds of meters away, sending him crashing into the river. Meanwhile, in the future, the battle was equally brutal. After Magneto rescued Rogue from the Sentinel base, the Sentinels immediately discovered their location. Iceman tried to slow them down by freezing the road, but there were far more Sentinels than expected. Surrounded by 3 Sentinels, Iceman was eventually overwhelmed and turned into vapor. Magneto used the opportunity to seal the entrance with metal and safely brought Rogue back to the aircraft. Professor X immediately started the engines and prepared for takeoff. But before they could leave, a flaming Sentinel crashed directly in front of the plane. As it prepared to deliver the final strike, Professor X activated maximum speed. The sudden acceleration almost threw the Sentinel away. Then he closed the hatch, trapping the Sentinel's arm. Under the extreme wind pressure, the Sentinel was finally ripped off the aircraft. When they returned to the base, Kitty Pryde had reached her limit. Rogue immediately absorbed Kitty's powers and took over, continuing to maintain Wolverine's consciousness through time. But they did not know the Sentinel's severed arm had already revealed their location. Soon, multiple transport ships approached the base. Everyone knew they were hopelessly outnumbered, but to give Wolverine enough time to change the future, they decided to fight until the end. Storm attacked first, using her powers to crash the transport aircraft together. The final battle began. Countless Sentinels poured out from the ships. Magneto immediately controlled the aircraft and threw it directly at the Sentinel army. Storm raised her hands and summoned lightning, detonating the aircraft engines. A massive explosion erupted in the sky, destroying dozens of Sentinels. Debris rained down toward the mutants. Magneto blocked most of it, but one piece of metal still pierced through his stomach. While everyone was distracted, a Sentinel suddenly attacked Storm. It stabbed straight through her body and threw her into the endless abyss. Bishop charged forward in rage, but the Sentinels surrounded him and pinned him down. With his final strength, Bishop activated his energy device and sacrificed himself, taking the Sentinels with him. Colossus was also overwhelmed and brutally torn apart. Sunspot was powerful, but he could not survive the combined attacks of multiple Sentinels. Blink was stabbed through by 3 Sentinels and died instantly. In the end, only Magneto remained. He used metal to block the entrance behind him. But against the endless Sentinel army, even he was forced backward. At the critical moment, Kitty Pryde arrived and rescued Magneto. The mutants were now on the edge of extinction. Their only hope was Wolverine traveling back 50 years to change history. If he failed, mutants would disappear forever. Meanwhile, at the White House, Magneto located the underground bunker. Using his powers, he lifted the entire structure from beneath the ground. With both hands, he ripped open the bunker entrance. Then he controlled every weapon inside and pointed them at the officials. The officials had no idea what was happening. Magneto waved his hand and controlled all the cameras, broadcasting himself to the entire world. He declared that mutants were the future. If humanity continued trying to destroy mutants, they would suffer the same fate as the people standing before him. From that moment on, mutants would no longer hide. But suddenly, the president ignored everyone around him and stepped toward Magneto. Magneto slowly approached, ready to kill him. Then, an out-of-control Sentinel attacked. As Magneto was distracted, the president pulled out a gun and fired. The bullet pierced through Magneto's neck. The president revealed his true identity. It was Mystique. After Magneto lost his ability to fight, the Sentinels also shut down and entered standby mode. To make sure he stayed down, Mystique kicked Magneto unconscious and aimed her gun at Trask. But at that moment, everyone suddenly froze. Professor X entered Mystique's mind. He tried to stop her. The future of mutants was now in her hands. If she killed Trask, mutants would become enemies of the entire world. Changing the future did not require murder. Maybe humans and mutants could still find a way to live together. Only by sparing Trask could mutants survive. Meanwhile, in the future, the Sentinels had broken through the final defense line and entered the base. As a Sentinel opened its head and prepared the killing blow, the Mystique from 50 years ago finally made her choice. She released the gun. At the same moment, the future changed. Every Sentinel disappeared. Everything was finally over. After waking up, Magneto said goodbye to Professor X and walked away. Days later, Wolverine woke from his sleep. When he walked outside, he discovered he was back at the Xavier Institute. The teammates who had died were all alive again. Kitty Pryde was teaching students. Beast was wearing a suit and rushing to class. Even Jean Grey had returned. Wolverine found Professor X and asked him to read his memories. Professor X remembered everything. He looked at Wolverine and said, "Welcome back." Wolverine had successfully changed the future, but everything he experienced had already been carved into his soul. After mutants saved the President and Congress, the Sentinel program was officially cancelled. Wolverine was later found by Colonel Stryker and injected with adamantium again. But the person pretending to be Stryker was actually Mystique, and that moment planted the seed for what would happen next.